So you think the studio looks inviting?
Yeah, I do. I like it. Looks fun.
Well, thanks. I get comments from people that walk in here that are like, twice now I've heard bow chicka bow now out of somebody. And I'm like,
part of it is you don't expect it. Like you said, you're coming into a garage, you know, and then you're like, whoa, they like set this up.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad it came out good. It was a tough process because we're just making this up out of nowhere. I don't know what we're doing here, making this up. And I didn't even know what colors to order. I knew I just had something kind of pictured, but I really didn't have a good solid picture that I was confident about, I'll be honest. So it just kind of came together. When these curtains showed up, they were way too pink for me.
Oh, really?
In my mind, in my eyes.
You wanted them like a dark.
I wanted them dark and rich. They come out on the camera. They come out dark and rich. But they're to me, they're a completely different color on the screen versus on the walls behind us. So I don't know if there's some movie magic involved there with all those little settings.
It works.
But Cody,
boom chicka bow. Yes.
Welcome to the Big Fat Podcast, my man.
Glad to be here.
I was talking to my mom the other day. My mom said, we love when Cody's on the podcast.
What?
She's talking about her and, my dad. They're down in Nevada. And she brought this up. She was like, we think that Cody is so fun. He's so fun on the podcast. We love it when Cody's on the podcast. And I was like, oh, great. I'll tell him.
Well, I like that compliment. I don't know what it is that makes it fun, but hey, I'll take it.
You're like I don't know, you're an easygoing guy. You got a good laugh. Yeah. You're like easy to be around. You're Mr. Positive. A lot of times when I'm like beat up or, over here, like you're pretty positive over there. So,
well, that's good. Tell her
it translates through the screen, through the microphone.
Well, I appreciate that's what you try for, right?
Yeah. So thank you for being a part of the Big Fat Podcast with us. We got quite a few episodes now behind us. We have many more to come here in the future. It's 2022. I wanted to talk with you about I'm not real big on New Year's resolutions. I don't stick to them just like everybody else doesn't stick to them. But it is a time I do kind of reflect a little bit. I do start kind of picturing where I want to kind of be next year as far as my business is concerned, or I kind of loosely have some goals. And I wanted to talk to you about, what are you thinking about? How did last year go? Okay. Are you where you thought you would be right now? And where are you wanting to be at the end of 2022? Take it from here. Go.
You asked a great question. New Year's goals. I like New Year's goals, but I am a goal-oriented person to start with. So from the time I was 18, I wrote down everything that I wanted to accomplish in my life. Everything from the person I wanted to marry, the type of person I wanted to marry, the kind of place I wanted to live, the education I wanted to receive. So for me, it's not about New Year's as much as it's about just having goals and going after them. And so being married is just having two people that have the same purpose of helping each other achieve their dreams. Does that help you a little bit?
Oh yeah. I'm all in on this.
So to say that, am I a New Year's goal oriented person? Well, yeah, I mean, that's a yes, but I don't every New Year's set a goal of a new, I do a little bit. This year I want to be able to have some mountains behind my place, and I want to make sure I hike them every day. One is for, try to get more and fit. But really, mine is about, above my visor, I have some 3x5 index cards. And in those index cards, I have...
Is this in your work vehicle or in your personal vehicle?
In my work vehicle. I actually would carry them around in my pocket. There's actually a goal card that I would put in my pocket. But right now, they're in the work vehicle. But above them, like one of them that I have is on one side, it reads Matthew 7:7 that says, ask and it will be given to you, knock and you shall find, seek and you will find, knock and it shall be opened unto you, seek and you shall find. And it says that 1,000 times in the scriptures. If you want something, go look for it, you'll find it. And so a lot of people, the problem is a lot of people don't think their goals are achievable, and so they don't really believe it. So that drive, that desire isn't strong enough for them to want to achieve that. And so you kind of have to think that this is what I want and nothing else matters mindset. And that's tough to do, especially when you have a family and things to support and places to pull you in different directions. But so in that, you flip the card over, and then I'll have my goals that I want to accomplish that are the important ones. And I try to look at them morning and evening. But, oftentimes I'll make it a point to look at them as often as I can. Now, this is where I always say this is where Cody gets a little weird. But the truth is everything is energy. At the end of the day, everything that we do is energy. We create energy. We give energy. It comes to and through us. Now, call it whatever you want, right? But the reality is our minds are a sending and receiving radio station. And so if you can hold something to the center of your mind, as you know, with all the different things that you've done, that if you can hold something on the screen of your mind long enough, and you have a strong enough desire to do it, it will happen. I mean, it will happen. So on that side of the card, I have act as though failure is not an option, because it's not. And but it's just reminding myself that. And then I'll have the goals of like one is, I want to pay my house off within 5 years. And so the date on that is my birthday, 5 years from today, actually, this year. When I set that goal, it was a little bit before New Year's, so I guess you could call that a New Year's resolution, right? But it's just like, it's big, audacious goals. So, there's people that will say, well, like, I want a new car, and it's goal worthy. You put down, on a new car. But if you ask them, they're like, well, I bought a new car 3 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. So it's not that's not a stretch for them. They know how to achieve a car, and there's nothing wrong with having that goal, but it's not the level of goal where, a goal should scare you. It should stretch you a little bit. It should make you out to be, man, how is that possible? And
I almost feel like it needs to be a little bit on the impossible side.
Absolutely.
Like go ahead and make it so big that, it's almost something to get a little nervous about, excited about.
Absolutely.
Go big, go ridiculous.
It should give you chills, and you should think that you're a little bit on the crazy side.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Definitely on the crazy side to others.
Oh, 100%. So I tell my kids all the time, and I said, guys, you're in a race that 95% of the people aren't in. They don't even understand it.
They don't even know there is a race.
They don't even know there is. 3% of adults have a goal. So when you really, now what I mean by a goal is it's not something they're thinking about. They write it down, they view it, right? 3%. And so as kids, it's a little bit higher. But as adults, there's a lot of them just don't go for it.
Yeah. I want to clarify, though, when I said a lot of them don't know that there is a race. I don't care about a rat race. I don't care about a race against each other. The race is to meet your potential. To me, that's the race. The race is...
Well, it's for me, it's the in search of a worthy goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's being successful. And so if that means that you have a school teacher who's teaching school and teaching a subject that they love, and trying to do the best that they can for it, they're being successful. If that's a mother who wants to be a stay-at-home mom and she's doing an excellent job at it, she's being successful. It's the potential. It's the goal towards working towards a worthy goal. But so I tell my kids that all the time. I said, you want to know what the key is to success? Is that goal? Thoughts become things. The way you tell yourself, what you tell yourself, how you see things, those thoughts become things. unforeseen circumstances come to your aid during those audacious goals, those big goals. And if you can hold it to the screen of your mind, and you have a desire to do it, and you put your feet to work, start moving those feet, then it'll happen. I promise you it will happen. And I've seen it time and time again in my life. One is, I can remember one of my goals was to have a master's degree. I didn't even know what that meant, other than it sounded really cool and have to master something. And I was raised with a mom with 5 kids. My dad was in jail, and so from an economic standpoint, there was no way that was possible, right? In school, my younger sister, we're a year and a half apart, and she'll run into, I can remember in 6th grade I was in special ed, and so she'll be like, she's always telling people, I know some of the most successful people I know were in special ed, So it's not about, where or how you view yourself. It's about what you view yourself and what it is that you want to achieve and accomplish. And remember that thoughts become things, And so if you can remember those things and you go towards it, it doesn't matter what people say. There's always going to be naysayers. And 95% of people are naysayers, right?
Definitely.
And so, it's just a matter of keeping your mind focused and going towards that.
How powerful do you think it is to surround yourself with like-minded people? I mean, does it matter? Does it matter who you're around? As an individual, are you strong enough to retain that mindset no matter who you're around? Or do you feel that it's that who you're around or what you surround yourself with is a factor?
Environment is definitely a factor. There's no way of denying that. Can you survive long enough in a negative? Yeah, I mean, to some extent, absolutely. But it's not going to be the same. You aren't going to flourish as well as if you surround yourself with positive people, and like-minded people. And because the reason why is you feed off of your energy from each other. And as an example, when I was going to school, I went to for my graduate program, I was taking counseling courses. Now, I love helping people on their career counseling, but when it comes to like working with people that are, severely depressed, and we've all been with people that you sit down and talk with them and you leave that room and you're dragging,
Yeah.
I mean, does that affect you? Absolutely. And so if you're around people that tell you can't do it, it's going to happen. I can remember my younger sister, so I had just come home from my mission. My younger sister was just graduated. She had spent a year at Utah State and just had a horrible experience. And it was just hard for her, just overall hard. And we went up to see my dad, and he was telling us, now she remembers this different. She remembers that he was telling her that the only people that would ever graduate from college would be your brothers. What I heard, which is the only one that matters, is what I heard, right?
Yeah.
Was that the only one who's going to graduate is your older brother, and he was a semester away from graduation because neither one of us had started. Well, technically she started a year, and then I was just starting. And so that bothered her as we were driving down the mountain. It was Ogden Canyon Mountain. And she's like, do you think he's right? I'm like, no, he's full of shit, like, that, right? And she's like, no, what do you mean? And I'm like, just because, I go, of course he's going to say that. I go, he's going to graduate, our older brother, Sean. I go, Sean graduates in 4 months. And he never graduated college. Nobody that we know graduated college. So of course he's going to say it that way because there's no other thing to say. And I'm like, so you need to just realize that most people are going to tell you something that's not true. But that doesn't change the fact that for you, it is true as long as you believe it. And it's kind of funny because there's a fine line between brilliant and crazy. And when it comes to dreams and living the life that you want, you got to straddle that line. And the thing that people forget is we don't, to my knowledge, right, we don't get a second chance of living our lives. we have a one chance of living the life that we want to live. And so it's a matter of you doing it,
Yeah.
And so that's it. Anyway, so that was the conversation that we had as we were driving down the mountain. And she did graduate, and she went on to graduate school. She owns her own company. So it is a matter of...
Really? What does she do?
She does... Man, I always screw this one up. She actually has two. She has one where she helps people like doing wedding planning. And,
okay. That's a big thing nowadays.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then the one that she does the main is hair removal. What do they call that?
This is where I wish April was here, because she's up on everything that everything.
It's Elevate. So, and she owns Elevate, but it's Elevate Your... I always call it reflexology, but it's not. That's totally different,
Yeah.
deal. But she goes in and eliminates people's hair and growing on. In fact, she'd be a great person to put on one of these things.
Yeah, we should have her on.
Yeah, she'd be good. She's actually, you think, so she's...
Where does she live?
She actually lives, so we have a mother-in-law apartment, and now it's a sister-in-law apartment at my place. So she lives in Laurel.
Oh, perfect.
She'd come do this. She's actually, Michelle's, we're always funny. She's a little bit more in your face. She'll tell you. If you're being ornery, she'll tell you. Where I'll do it, but it's a different way. And so it's funny to like get the two of us. But in college, we were president and vice president at one point.
Really? Of the college?
Of the college, yeah.
Of the student body or?
Student body, yeah.
Yeah.
And we had worked our way, so we worked our way through college in the residential side of things, so the housing side of things.
Yeah.
And paid for school that way. And then for a few years after, we stayed. Why would you leave when everything's paid for?
Exactly. So you stuck around. You stuck around for a while, though. You knocked out a lot of schooling, right?
Correct.
We've already talked about this, I know, but I'm always fascinated to hear how you did things. But
so I started on a wrestling scholarship, and then got married and realized that it would pay for both of us if I did the housing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is, it's kind of one of those things you fall into.
Yeah.
And we had how that happened for me on the housing side of it is they have RAs, which is each wing of a residence hall.
Yeah.
As resident advisor is what it's called. And he was what I always say is that we found him one day passed out, didn't even make it into the building, so we picked him up and carried him to his room and kind of babysat him for the night. And we became friends with them is what it ended up being. Well, that's a big no-no. We didn't know it. We were freshmen, but there just happened to be in that particular wing, there was like 10 of us, and 4 of us were returned missionaries that were on the wrestling team. And so I guess to be more clear, there were 2 of us that were returned missionaries, and then we were rooming with people that wanted to go on missions. And so anyway, we took him to his room and took care of him, and he was like, I got the easiest. He goes, you guys are like the easiest wing of everybody. We got, because there's certain party wings and stuff. And it wasn't
a bunch of missionaries and wannabe missionaries.
Yeah. So we had fun, but it wasn't, we weren't partying.
Yeah, but probably your version of fun was a twister game that got out of control,
Yeah, it was a twister game. In the showers, or something. No, I'm just kidding. But, we had pop. I could remember one time we had a buddy that was in that same wing, and he'd come over and he goes, dude, my roommate always has his girlfriend over,
Yeah.
And we're like, what do you mean? And he's like, yeah, I can't go in there because they're busy, And we're like, how often? He goes, all the time.
Oh,
we're like,
man.
all right, well, we advised this plan where, I should tell you, these are stories you'd love, but he goes, well, what can I do? And I'm like, oh, dude, go get some popcorn. So we popped popcorn. We walked in and we sat down as we were eating popcorn, put a movie in, and they were on the top bunk. They had, 2 bunks.
Yeah.
They were on the top bunk, and we'd get up and it'd be like, we'd be like, Milo, good for you. Go get her, buddy. And we'd throw popcorn and sit down and turn the movie on.
Oh.
Needless to say, they left fairly quick.
I bet.
And they were, I was heavyweight. The other one was like the 97-pounder.
Yeah.
And so it probably had a little to do with the fact that they couldn't do much to us.
Yeah, right. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? Yeah.
Hulking guy throwing popcorn at you and your girlfriend.
Yeah.
You're going to get out of there because you don't want to look bad in front of your girlfriend. That's what you're going to do.
Exactly. They kind of left. So that minimized their experience of wanting to come in and make out in the bedroom, in a room together with this guy. And he was a wrestler too, but he was younger, and so he was always like, "Hey, thanks so much,"
Yeah.
And we had anyway. There was a couple of them that one person had a party, and we were trying to sleep because we had to get up to school, so it was like 2 a.m. And we walked over and like, "Hey, you guys got to take this somewhere else." And they're like, "What do you mean? It's my room." And we're like, "Not for long. If you keep doing this,
Yeah.
like boot it." And so it was, once in a while they looked at us, but what are you going to say? There's not a lot they're going to tell us.
Yeah.
So
what school was this at?
Northwest in Powell, Wyoming. It was
okay.
College.
Yeah.
Loved it. I loved it there. And, just as a different side, one of those, my job there that semester, actually, when I first started, was to be in the weight room. And so I remember sitting in the weight room doing my homework as people would show their memberships, and it was open to the community, but a lot of the college kids would be in there. And you had to have somebody maintain it. And the guy that did that was our coach. And so he would break up the hours, so we'd have 10 hours or so. And he got paid minimum wage. Well, I remember I was doing homework, kind of sitting, watching what they were doing. And coach comes in and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Homework." And he goes, "Are you done?" I'm like, "Yeah, just about." And he goes, "Good. I want you lifting." And I was like, "Lifting? We lifted this morning, And he goes, "What do you think I pay you for?" And I'm like, "Okay." And he goes, "If there's less than 50 people in here," you couldn't put 50 people. I mean, if it's like a rush hour, there might be 35,
Right.
And he goes, "If there's less than 50 people, I want you guys working out." And so we got paid 10 hours a week to do homework or work out is what I call it. We had to wipe the benches down and stuff at the end of the day, but
that's a good gig.
it was a pretty good gig, yeah. I mean, I can remember, thinking, why would I want to leave this? Like, this is a sweet gig. I get paid to work out.
Yeah.
I have a scholarship. And during that process, I learned that I love to learn. And so I went from, working in the weight room. We did outdoor recreation. So we handed out, like, the people that wanted to go river rafting or mountain climbing or ice climbing. You had all the gear.
Yeah.
And so we got to know those guys. So anytime we wanted to go do something, we had, the college access to the directors of it. I mean, there were some limits, but for the most part, we could do. We went river rafting down a lot of the rivers around Wyoming and Montana. We went to Hawaii on a spring break cruise. Every year they had a trip going somewhere. And I worked for the activities department. Michelle actually was the director at one point of the activities department as a student. So they gave her a scholarship to, plan activities. And so we went all over the Pacific Northwest, where they would send the college kids over for a weekend or, 4 days. And we got a room and hotels, and it was fun. I remember when I got married, the guy that was directing it, he's like, "Cody, do you and your wife want to go to Portland?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you have to be you guys are the representatives for the school." And so I was kind of on a fine line because I worked for the school.
Yeah.
I was also a student. And so he goes, you guys qualify, just if there's any questions, give me a call. And I think he knew that we weren't, going to go there and just, go crazy. So you got, like, at that time, I can remember, if we stopped, each one of the kids that we were with, the students would all get $3 for, like, drinks, and
Yeah.
the hotel was paid for, the gas to get there was paid for.
What about what year was this? $3. What year was this?
98 probably. It probably would have been 98. Started in 97. So they could spend more, but it had to be from their pocket, right? The
right.
school gave them $3.
A little bit of help.
So they could buy a drink or a candy bar or something on the way
Yeah.
out. And we could stop. He goes, "You want to, so you have the money and you could do it anyway." It'd be like, if we were 4 days and it was 2 stops, $6, you know, so you could say, all right, Milo, so you got $32. You can go do what you want with, or you just either give it to them up front, or you had to stretch it out. And some of them were horrible with money. They'd spend it all at one stop, and so you'd be like, buddy, what did you buy? What did you buy? You can't spend $12. Like you got 4 more days.
And they got an empty Snickers wrapper and a few Jolly Ranchers.
Yeah. And they would often come with when we left to college, you'd get brown bag sacks and stuff, but not everybody wanted to eat, what they were giving them. And so you'd have to see, do you have your own money that you're going to spend? Because once you're out, you're out.
Yeah.
And it's either that or you're going to eat a 4-day-old sandwich,
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of just having those conversations with people. Most of them had their own money, but there were a few that were, it was tight. And they didn't even know that the college provided. They were just going to show up and be like, I don't know, I'll bum for food.
Yeah.
And
during this period, do you feel that were you as focused on goals back then? I know you said goals have always been a big deal to you, but during that period, were you as aware that you were so goal driven as you are now?
Man, I've asked that question to myself a lot. So I wrote my goals when I was 17, actually. And I had in my locker in high school pictures of the goals that I want. So I'd call it kind of a fantasy picture board, right? Back then, it was different. It was, you were 18, 15 to 18. So it was, I didn't put the girl that you wanted to date on my locker, but it was things of dating, kind of dates you wanted to go on, the sports, so for me it was about being a state champion. So I'd look at the state champion, and I had it everywhere. I mean, I had it in the mirror of my car when I woke up in the morning, and looked in the mirror of the bathroom. Went to sleep at night, I was surrounded by positive affirmations. I had anybody who grew up with me, they'll tell you stories of he literally, my room, I had taken that, cardboard and colored paper, broke them up into thirds and wrote, I am positive, I can do it. People like me. I'm a state champion. I'm good at school. I'm worthy. And I mean, I plastered them. So I was surrounded by them. So to say, was I less focused? I think that I didn't understand the psychology behind it at that time that I did later in life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I hook, line, and sinker believe that you could surround yourself with your environment.
Yeah, I've gone through those phases where I had something up on a mirror, or I don't know, some messages like that. I kind of go in phases though, and I can't really keep it up for some reason. I somehow mentally picture these things, and I don't know that that's as good. It's probably not as good, but I tend to.
It's better in some ways. So you're visualizing is what it's called. So it's visioneering.
Okay.
And so in a lot of ways, that's where it matters. The rest of it's your environment. So what makes us different than the animals, that are out there is the animals blend into their environment. We can create our environment. We have the ability to make the environment fit what we want. What I mean by that is look where we're at, And so, from the outside appearance, what is this building?
It's the Uncle Sam's complex.
It's the Uncle Sam's complex.
Downtown Columbus.
But when you come inside the building, what is it?
Yeah.
And so that's the difference of internal versus external. We, as humans, have the ability to create the environment that we want. And not everybody believes that. But when I tell my kids, thoughts become things. And you have the ability, your internal person, right, has the ability. So we are co-creators of our lives, regardless of whether people believe it or not. You can't tell me, it's kind of like being in a foxhole. There's no atheist in a foxhole.
Yeah.
Right? Whether you believe in Buddha, whether you believe in God or Christianity, it does not matter. As long as you believe that there's a universal power that's out there, If you don't, the reality of it is that's going to be a problem. But as long as you understand the universal power that goes on out there, and that your body is a co-creator of your world, you will get things to happen for you. Now, for every yin, there's a yang. So for every positive person, there's a negative person. And they need to be out there, but they're not easy to be around. And so if you want to get me cranky really quick, put me around somebody who's negative all the time. And it's amazing how, like, after a while, I'll be like, are you freaking kidding me? Because they're in their world, nothing works out for them, and they're 100% correct, because that's all they attract to themselves.
Yeah.
Right? You can't attract positive people to a negative environment. It just won't freaking happen. It's like trying to put two magnets together and one's upside down and the other, you know what I mean? It's just
Yeah, they're so focused on the negative side that they can't even be aware of the positive things. So that's why the positive things don't exist. Perception is reality. You're not even perceiving the positivity.
Correct. Absolutely.
Like you woke up this morning in America in 2022.
Yeah, we already won the lottery.
You already, yeah.
We've won the lottery just by being in America.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like being born at this time. Like this is the easiest time in world history. Not for everyone. There's difficulties out there. But in general, there's a lot of people right now that are saying, why would I bring kids into this world? Or why would I whatever? With everything that's going on right now. If you think that, then when was there ever a good time to bring kids into this world?
Absolutely. I mean, you look back in the past and learn history, there's always upheaval. There's always negative. There's always, if someone thinks that there's not power in the evil that goes on, there absolutely is. There's more power in the positive. And what I mean by that is if you study, there's only two things. So there's two things you can do. You can do science and understand the universe, try to understand it, or you can do theology, which is a study of God, right? In those two areas comes out to positivity. And the father of the space engine, or at least the, what's his name? Dr. Van Braun. I know we've talked about this.
Werner von Braun?
Yeah.
Or Werner
von Braun.
Werner Van Buren. Or wait. Oh my gosh. I know this guy.
I do too. So that guy, okay, so
I don't want to say Van Braun because I'm mixing up Hitler's wife, Eva Braun. But it's Werner von
Braun, I think. Braun. Anyway.
Whatever.
Doesn't matter.
Head of NASA.
He was
former Nazi scientist, did the V2 rocket, and
so if you study him, right, one of the things he says when President Kennedy asked him, can we land a rocket on the moon? And he goes, the only thing that we need is the will to do it. And he himself...
And some Nazi technology. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, sure. You know what I mean? But the reality of it is he was stating, and this is one of the things I love, is he stated that we can calculate the landing on the moon to seconds by the laws of the universe. And if you can do that, you have to believe in a higher power, and that's the science of it. And then you've got the theology behind it and understanding the bigger the universe, and that there's universal powers. And if you follow those laws, that you will be blessed for them.
Where have you been studying this guy? Where have you been? Because I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, I got to read a book on this guy. This guy would be fascinating for serious.
He is fascinating. I've read different, the interesting part is I love history. And so going back to high school, but really college, you learn to pick different, Hitler, not that I want to be big on Hitler, right? But Hitler was charismatic. And anytime you can get the masses to agree on something, right? It's interesting to watch those kind of people. But the choice is they choose to do good with it, or you choose to do bad. So the answer to that is everywhere I can, you try to find something, but I'm always looking for the positive side of it, not the negative side.
Like, yeah, you're looking at the positive lessons. I just keep bringing up that he's a Nazi, and
Right. I don't care that he's a Nazi. You know what I mean? Yeah, sure.
I also kind of, in a way, I know that the technologies that we have, I mean, I just do it because I do try to keep some things in perspective. I try to remember there's some life lessons here that we shouldn't forget. There's some things along the way. Not that I want to just dwell on the negative side, but I do want to keep a greater perspective of that with the good, there was some bad, but the bad doesn't outweigh the good if you're going to move forward. You can't let the bad outweigh the good if you're going to move forward.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. You know, there's some books that I read one time, the Hunt for the SS. You know, and I didn't realize that, you know, up until 1990, we were still hunting the former SS all over the world.
You know what? Honestly, I just saw a news thing like a year ago that they put a guy on trial who was like 17 years old. Guard at 18
I read that.
years old.
I read that too.
They still caught up with this guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, maybe there was more of a concerted effort, or there was a budget for it, or something. You know,
there was a whole department.
Yeah,
you know,
but
so
they come across them. They still go after them,
and they're still processing them.
Yeah,
for the
prosecuting. Yeah.
So it's yeah. Anyway, so I just I think history is interesting. And there's a lot to be learned from history. But to answer your question is, yes, there's negative things that happen. But how would you like to be judged for the worst thing that you did in your life? You know? Now, a lot of us kind of lucked out, and maybe that didn't become the focus of our lives. But there's a lot of people out there that did become the focus of their lives. And, you know, it's shown that those that go to prison come out worse oftentimes than those that, you know, had they not made it to prison, and did counseling. So it's interesting, that aspect of it, just the psychology of what happens to people that and this is true when you grow up. If you're being told you're, you know, horrible from the time you're a kid, you know, by the time you're 20, you know, those inner voices of your parents, you know, yeah, you're going to have a hard time in life trying to switch things around a little bit. And so our environment is huge.
Yeah. Side hustles. I know, you know, we know that you're the manager over there at, by the way, I need some propane. I got to call you guys. Like,
oh,
it's getting scary. It's getting scary. I'm way low, and I keep thinking about it, and I'm like, oh, I got to call Jamie, and I got to get on the agenda. So I'm going to do that today. I'm calling over there and getting on the list because we're like getting low. But anyway, Madison River Propane.
Send me a text.
You run this huge organization here in Columbus called Madison River Propane, and you guys do an awesome, great job. I love dealing with you guys. So, but that is not your whole thing. I mean, you have that, but then you also have side hustle. How important is it? Do you feel that everybody should have a side hustle?
I think I do. I don't know if everybody's in the mindset of a side hustle, but I do think that you should. And interestingly enough, when I was in graduate school, I had attended a conference where a guy was saying, how do you retire from being a, you know, in this time it was higher education, but it was an educator. You know, how do you retire a millionaire being an educator? And in his presentation, he talked about doing side hustles that made the difference for him. And he's like, I'm going to tell you that I've accomplished this. And he was still working at the time. And I remember him saying, you know, I made $70,000 selling soap one year that I put into the stock market and invested in it. And I remember thinking in the audience going, $70,000 on a side hustle? You know, his job, he made $35,000.
Yeah.
So he doubled what his employment was, you know. Now that I'm older and understand what he was doing, most likely he was probably in Amway back then, because Amway started with soap.
Yeah.
But he was selling just soap to his neighbors as a side hustle and made $70,000 one year.
Wow.
That he took into, and what I found fascinating in that aspect was the investment of the stocks, right? And that was what I've always found really interesting, is how do you invest and have little things. But there's little things, like there was a guy during that same time frame, we ran into a guy who was he had car washes in Billings. He owned 3 car washers, but he had cancer, and so he's looking at trying to sell them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at buying them, me and a buddy of mine. He wanted too much for him once we were figuring out the analysis. But for 3 months, we ran those car washers. Well, one of the guys that would come around, he was always looking at the vacuums. And at the bottom of the vacuums, they weren't locked. He would open them up, and he'd collect the change from the vacuums of people's cars.
Oh.
And
you got to want change really bad, because what you're vacuuming up in there is like
and he would search through it, and we had to just toss it and throw it away, right? This guy would go through them. He'd come every day and he'd go through it. And I remember
that's a side hustle, right?
That's a side hustle, right? And I remember asking him, both the buddy that I was with, his name's Jason. Jason and I were like, hey, what are you looking for? Like, what are you doing? And he'd find 10 cents. Sometimes he'd find $1.
Yeah.
And he's like, come here. And we go into this he had this little red Mitsubishi kind of truck. It was I always call them the farmer beaters, where they're watching the grass grow kind of thing. And in the back of it, he had water jugs, those gallon jugs full of these things. And I remember thinking, what are you going to do with those, I'm like, what do you do? And he goes, I take my kids to Disneyland every year. And he goes, it takes me $2,000 and I find $2,000 in spare change.
Wow.
At vacuums. In these. Now, how many of them he did in Billings, I have no idea. He did all 3 of the ones that we were doing.
Just making the rounds.
So he can take his kids to Disneyland, which...
I hate change. Honestly, if I'm running a vacuum, I'll suck that change up in a heartbeat. Like, I hate change. I shouldn't be that way.
Well, it's
in the way. I'm like, I don't know.
Well, it depends on how you look at it, right?
Yeah.
Because if there's somebody out there like him, you're helping somebody go to Disneyland.
There you go.
Right? Or, you could help yourself go to Disneyland. It doesn't matter. It's on how you choose to see it.
I do have a big, huge jug at home that, I'll throw change in. But more and more, and I'm not anti-cash on this stuff. I'm actually, we need cash. But, I rarely have cash on me. That's just the nature of the world nowadays, and I don't have as much cash on me. Some people do. They operate with cash. I used to go home every day, take the change out of my pocket, throw it in the jug. And I just find that I rarely have even cash on me nowadays. We're all getting sucked into using, a card or an app or, things like that. I don't even use a card now when I go to McDonald's. I get on an app. I order my food before I get over there. I say, hey.
But the concept's the same when it comes to find a hustle that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so the point is so here's a guy that was a custodian, basically.
Yeah.
And he wanted to take his kids to Disneyland. And he found a way to do it. And so to me, that was a way of like, wow, there's always something out there.
There is. And I feel that right now, and I've been telling my kids this, never has there been more opportunity than there is right now to just make money with side hustles and just different things. And, so many things now are just on your phone as far as an app, whether it's Uber Eats or, my daughter Alex out in Portland, she actually makes a killing like walking people's dogs for them,
service. Yeah.
I mean, just, and then she's in total control of it, and her rates, her everything, and she can run it like a business, and like it's supply and demand. She can raise her rates if she has too many jobs popping up and too many people are hiring her. I'm like, raise your rates. So she could go in there and adjust it and raise her rates. She'll do it less, but she's making more. Different little things. I don't know. I can go on all day about the opportunities nowadays that there's so many around us.
Absolutely. And I think that there's so when you said, does everybody do it? Not everybody is an entrepreneur at heart.
That's true.
And not everybody's extrovert.
That's true.
There's some introverts that it's hard for. But the truth of it is if you're an entrepreneur at heart, you need to have something. Like, I can tell you that for me, and this is just my own experience, my wife, when we were, this was going back 17 years ago, she's like, we need to go find a farm or a ranch that you can, so I can have you a home.
Yeah.
And the reason why is not really thinking it hers. When I was in school, I was going to school full time and I had 3 jobs. Not because I needed 3 jobs, I could tell myself that I did, right? But it was stuff like we would set a goal to go on vacation. One was to go on vacation to Hawaii. Another one was our goals were, we wanted to take our kids and show them the history of what we have in our own backyard. It's one thing to talk about a peninsula, and say, well, it's, a body of water that, water's around 3 sides, and, you have, Florida as a peninsula, right?
Right.
But it's a different to take your kids on an airplane and show them what that is. And the same with like the Alamo. You can talk about the Alamo, but how many people have been able to say they've been there? And so our goal was to take our kids and do that. So I always wanted something that was a little, and I always find there's tons of little things that are fun to just try.
Yeah.
Be like, man, that'd be kind of a fun job. And so she's like, we've got to find something that you're going to have to, come home and do. And so I make it sound as though that was the reason that we moved out on the, 50 acres, which it's not a lie, but we wanted to as well. But the problem is if I'm sitting home and it's like 4 hours, watching a video or a movie or something, a good day, 2 days, and I'm done. Like I don't even know if I can make it a day without doing something.
Yeah.
And so it's, I'm not one that wants to come home, sit on the couch and, eat muffins and watch the latest of the Brady Bunch.
So you're proactive. You're on the go.
Yeah, I can't sit still very long.
That's good though. You got to keep moving.
But it's interesting to change it. So with that, I think the side hustles are vitally important to find something that you want to do and make. I mean, there's money to be made. Why is it that we can have people come from other countries that come in with, they can't even speak the language, and they can make more money than some people that stay here and grow up?
You know why? Because they come from difficulty. They come from struggle. They come from less. And that sharpens people up. I feel that we, in our little society here, whatever, our country here, I feel like we've gotten soft. There's always, I just do. I just feel like we've gotten soft. We've gotten less hungry. And I feel like there's a lot of people that come from other countries that they didn't have as much opportunity. There was struggle. There was whatever. And they all come over and they're prepared to live 3 families in a small apartment and work hard and save their money for 10 years and then go all in on something because they realize that there's real opportunity here. If you're just focused and you can save your money, you can go all in on something and whatever. And I feel like when we're all born and raised in this situation, you lose sight of things. Well,
I would agree with that. I think there's some changes. The difference is the way people look at things. One of the things is we grow up with when you're 18, you're out of the house, right?
Yeah.
Mentality. And there were some Asians that moved in down the street from me when I was growing up. And they had, 3 generations living in one place.
Yeah.
And then they bought, one building and move on and they'd buy another one. And that was interesting to me to watch because I remember them living in one building and then they bought a neighboring building. And we got to know them. They were a few years older and there was a couple that were a few years younger. And as we got to know them, they're like, well, with all of us earning, we can pay this house off in 5 years. And that always stuck with me because it's just the mathematics behind it, right?
Yeah.
And how they can pay. And so what they did,
But as a family, they come together and they have a drive, they have a purpose as a
they
family.
knew that it was only for a short time. For them, it was 5 to 7 years.
Yep.
And then they were going to move over and break it up in half, but they were going to continue to purchase that one. And they did the same thing with the business that they were running. They had a business and they would work it, and then they'd go do it. Some of them had another job, and they would come back and work the business. And we aren't raised with that mentality. That is not something that's like, hey, this put 3 generations in it. That's not how we're raised with it. And so it's a lot of it is just the difference of how we choose to see our reality with them. But that's true with everybody. So when it comes to a side hustle, finding something that you love to do or that you are interested in, it's big.
Yeah. I feel also I'm starting to I feel that your side hustle somewhat needs to be, I don't know, it's easier at times. It's not this way for everyone. I feel that side hustle is easier if it's somehow closely related to your first hustle. So like with the burritos that we're now doing our bottled sauces, and we're doing that online, and it's starting off slow, and business just starts off slow. It always does. But this way, at least with this side hustle that we're developing, we're trying to, I don't know if you call it a side hustle, or is it mainly just another development of our first hustle. But how important do you feel that is to I know, because I know you have a side hustle, and I know that it's not like directly related to what your first thing is. But how important is that? Do you feel like it is important, or is it a good release to get away or focus on something different from what you go work at 9 to 5?
So the answer to your question is, it's easier when they're related, right?
Yeah.
But you own both aspects of that. And so you can find yourself in trouble. Like if I were to, try to do something that's closely related to propane, I could find myself, in trouble. What I mean by in trouble is
right.
Either work, is going to say, hey, you're competing.
I know exactly what you're saying there, but what if your side hustle being related to your first hustle is more of, hey, you're a manager here. What else are you good at managing? You see what
absolutely.
I'm saying?
Yeah,
like
I do.
It doesn't have to be that. Or in the propane thing, like, could you develop a product that could be sold to your first hustle or industry wide?
So this is where we differ a little bit. So that's called intellectual property. And so if you were to do that at any point while you were working for that company, then that product would then become theirs.
Well, I'm not saying. Well, I think we're looking at this differently.
I know. I'm just saying that the reason why
if you figured out that, hey, there's a tool that would make this job easier. There's
Absolutely.
something that you can't find in this industry, but I have an idea here where if I could get this, this would make my job easier. Could I make this product or make this tool that would
absolutely? So to answer your question is yes, it's always easier if it's closely related to what you do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mine is I've been involved in too many situations from a business standpoint where the connections made that they lose that side hustle.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Where you own the whole product of the original one and what you're doing, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, absolutely. You can, there's some that, the company says, I don't care, go ahead and go for it. Right.
Yeah.
But I've been involved with a couple of those where one worked out great for the person. The other one, somebody change of leadership and, they no, that's ours.
Yeah.
And so then you find yourself in this battle of, whose is it? So if you make them totally separate, where it's, there's the clean cut is this is done on my time, this is done on their time.
I'm going to say your first hustle is you're a people person. You manage people.
Yeah.
And you all of that. I'm going to say your second hustle or your side hustle is in the same business.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at it in those terms, right? One of the things that I know that I'm good at is management of people and helping, dealing with people, people skills, right? Not everybody has that. And so coming up, what I like about your side hustles, for me, it's a little bit more of a setting goals and dreams of, places you want to achieve, things you want to do.
Yeah.
And so in my, side hustle, it's about building wealth. And there's two ways you can build wealth. There's either money builds money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or people build people. And so those are the two aspects that come out to building. We're only able to do so much without extra people to build a business.
Right.
And then, you can only, there's a dollar amount of how much you can make with just you. Short of raising prices,
Correct.
Know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Only because our time is finite. We only are given a certain amount of time. And you could even argue that our time is a commodity.
Yeah.
And so we either need to increase that by people, or we increase that by making money make money for us. And so for me, it's about those two aspects coming together and helping other people achieve what you want to achieve or whatever their goals are.
Yeah.
To do it. So in that aspect, when we're talking like 7K, well, 7K has its own company, but it has gold and silver. Well, after the first year, this is going to blow you away. After the first year of being involved with it and understanding that the commodity, right? Precious metals is a commodity, and the people, which is a commodity, right? The people that work for you. Those two things coming together. At the end of that, I had been able to save. I just counted this up actually about 2 months ago, right before Christmas. Actually, right before Thanksgiving, I had over $50,000 in precious metals that I earned. I didn't pay for them. I earned them through your commissions, through
That's
other
incredible.
people. Yeah. And I know that from the investment side of things, that silver and gold always go up. When was the last time it went down? Right.
Right.
And
it fluctuates, but the general trend is it's just always
and
up.
silver is more volatile, right, based off of what's out there.
Right.
Than gold's a little bit more steady. So gold's going to be 8.3, 8.4 percentage every year, where silver has averaged over the last 5 years at 16%. And you can even you mix the two together, you can actually get around 12 to 13% of a return on your money that's always going to be going up. And so I view, for me, it's about the return of saving, having a little bit of money that you can save. And then there's a lot of fun that comes with it. There's places you go, but each one of those silver and gold comes with, artwork that's associated that through the pneumatics world.
We should have gotten into this part of it now, because
we can always do a different one.
Right, we're gonna have to do a Cody part 2, because I'm watching the time here, and I got one more minute with you, so I'm fascinated.
Oh man, it's gone fast.
Yeah, because I wanted to get way more into this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link in the description of this podcast to your side hustle, your 7K. Anybody who wants to find out more about that, they can hit that link and go check that out. But then I think we need to do a recording, because I want to go deeper into this. I want to know how it all works. I want to know what's worked for you. I have other questions about that. I want to know things like what kind of challenges are you having right now in that? And I want to know things like, what did you not know in the beginning that you know now, or you wish you'd known in the beginning? I want to go. We'll do a part 2.
Yeah, we got to do part 2, because both of those answers are good answers, and at the end of my 90 days, I kind of did what is called a 90-day run. At the end of that, I realized, like, holy crap, what do I got myself into? And so then I spent the next 6 months. So to answer that just a little bit, my biggest fault in it was I did not manage the people that started as well as I could have.
I see.
Because I didn't know what I had. And at the beginning, it was just something that was, fun to do. And after that, I started taking a hard look at, like, whoa, there's actually something here. And, what's the value of that? Both intrinsic and extrinsic. But what's the value that we have that we're sitting on this? And so absolutely, we need to do a different one, because it would really do a deep dive into all of, everything that we're doing.
Yeah, and I think there's stuff to learn from that on many levels. I'm always interested about what people are doing. There's lessons to be learned in what other people's side hustles are. What are their goals? What drives them? Why do they do that? It may not be my side hustle. It may not be my thing that somebody else is doing, but I feel like, there's stuff to learn there. At some point, I don't know, maybe what somebody's into, I can deploy that in what I'm doing. So
there was a kid. This is another one. I should reach out to him because he lives in Billings, but in college, and I actually managed him. When I was doing the housing, I ended up being the director of housing and residential life, and he was one of the ones that I employed as an RA. But he started with just grabbing, because he saw the value of, he had returned a textbook for $20 that he paid $80 for. And so he started just doing it on campus for the kids. He would come back, and if the bookstore would give him $20, he'd give him like $22.50 or $23, just a little bit more. And then he would hold them and then sell them just a little bit less than what the bookstore would sell them for. And I saw both, what he was doing, and then the bookstore side of it. And the bookstore was like, you know what? Let him do it. It doesn't affect us that big a deal, right? Well, he paid for his college. He was going to a private school. Paid for his college selling textbooks.
Wow.
And not all of them were in.
It's interesting how somebody sees that margin.
Yeah.
They see that margin and they're like, there's a margin there.
There's something that he can do. And he would come in and be, he'd mail them out. And that was at the very beginning stages.
An arbitrage.
It was an arbitrage.
He identified an arbitrage.
Absolutely. And I happened to, about 5 years ago, we both got called to jury duty. And it was the guy who was raping old women or whatever around Billings. Do you remember that?
I don't.
And anyway, so we get called to this place, and there's like 300 people into this jury selection. And they went through, in and of that is a whole nother story of it. But I ran into him in this meeting, and he's like, Cody, what are you doing? And so we were talking, and I'm like, what are you still doing? He goes, I sit at home and sell books. So he went to school, paid for his school doing it, and then continued to do it. His wife's, been able to stay home, and they sit at home and buy and sell books and
textbooks for college students.
Textbooks for colleges. And so it's that in and of itself. I can remember when he was doing it, and I even sold some of my textbooks back to him. I was like, man, that is not something I want to do. Like, I have zero desire for that. None. But it was an amazing side hustle for him that turned into a full-fledged job.
Hey, sometimes that's why you go to college. It's to identify something that had nothing to do with what you're being taught in college.
It's expand your mind. Yep,
it
absolutely.
is, and the networking and the opportunities that arise from it. If there's anything to be said for college, which I think college is a dying industry, by the way. I know we've had this talk before, but
we've had this talk. I think that, I don't disagree with you. I think there's a different side of it.
Yeah.
Because it's a matter of expanding your knowledge, and there's so many different, the YouTube is amazing.
Yeah.
But that's another one. We can have a whole conversation about that.
That is. Always good to talk to you, my friend. I always learn a lot. We're like, you're going to be late and I'm going to feel bad, but I appreciate you talking. I always learn. I tell my kids, I give my kids pep talks all the time. I can't help it. It's just in my nature. They say something, they remotely bring something up and it turns into a pep talk and it turns into goals. It turns into you can do, focus on that, blah, 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 blah. But there's times, honestly, in my life where I'm like, where do I get a pep talk from? I need a pep talk. Who's gonna boost my morale? Like I don't know. And in a small way, I was thinking about that earlier when you were talking. I was like, Cody's my pep talk. And that's, I don't just ask you these questions to just fill a void. Like, I'm asking you questions. I like to hear your perspective. I like to hear what you have to say, because it's good to get an outsider perspective. Just like I try to be an outsider perspective to my kids, like help them keep perspective. Like, you're worrying about the wrong things here,
Yeah.
And so I do ask you these questions legitimately because I'm interested in your perspective. I want that outsider point of view, and in my head, I'm applying it to. So just know.
I do too. I do it. But to answer yours, for me, it's a matter of finding people. It's little bits, like. People ask me, they're like, well, how did you ever become, the father that you want to do? And for me, it's about, my dad wasn't around when I was a teenager. And so it's finding people, that I was like, ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that, And so it's finding the good that's out there, is the short answer. But it's, you got to find people that you can relate to.
For sure. All right. Thank you, my man. We got to get you out of here.
All right. Sounds good.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening. Our listenership is going up. Our viewership is kind of slowly going up.
That's good. That's what we want.
Yeah. Every day I go in and I check the stats and everything.
Good deal.
Anyway, it's happening. The Big Fat Podcast will someday be big and fat. And it's due largely to you and your perspective, Cody.
Well, I don't believe that, but I sure appreciate the comment.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.